it can be really difficult to face the facts of where you are at that moment in time. And whether that's you or whether that's a loved one, like a parent or a grandparent, who believe that they can, do everything themselves. And it's so obvious that that's not the case. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Quality of Life Quest. My name is Anneke. And in today's very short, is it a rant? I don't know. Maybe a general message for the public in Great Britain. I don't know. If you find yourself in hospital and it's taking a bit longer than you were hoping for, perhaps, and you think that you might be fit enough to go home, do not discharge yourself lightly. I'm not saying don't discharge yourself because, there are moments in time where discharging yourself is the best option for you at that moment in time. But on the whole, the NHS is stretched. And if doctors want to keep you in hospital, then there must be a reason for it, whatever that reason is. And particular for people who are waiting for follow-up things or for a package of care. And package of care means that if you are going home, that there is a district nurse visiting you, or that there are people coming in to help you with whatever it is, whether it is hygiene for yourself or whether it is cooking a meal or washing the dishes, or it doesn't matter. There's a whole list of things that you might need help with. That all falls under package of care. And it can take some time for that package of care to be in place. At this moment in time, and it's now July 2025, at this moment in time, it can be difficult to arrange a package of care that is suitable for a particular patient. So it can take longer than what you want, or it can take longer than what is necessary for you to be in hospital. So maybe you are well enough to go home, but you need a package of care, but the package of care is not in place yet because they're scrambling to find people to provide that actual care. But you've managed so far with family or, spouse or whatever, and you think that might be achievable again. I would argue against it. I would argue for you to stay in hospital, because as long as you're in hospital, there's a visual pressure to get things organized. They want you to move on, and they will do whatever it takes to get the package of care in place for you to go home. Whilst if you go home and you're not in hospital anymore, who's going to arrange your package of care? And you'll have to arrange it for yourself, which is quite difficult. It can be quite difficult. Maybe there are areas in the UK where it's easy to get it arranged, but most areas it's difficult. There just aren't the people to do the actual work. So yeah, that's my warning. You may think that you can muddle on, but when hospital thinks you need a package of care, you might really, really need a package of care. A lot of people, when they end up in A&E or the emergency department, once they've gone through the initial phases of what's wrong with them, they still live in the past. So when you ask someone, how do you go to the toilet? Oh yeah, I walk to the toilet. Yeah, but that was yesterday. So what is it today? How do you propose this is going to happen? And when you already see that it's difficult for a patient to move from a chair to the bed or from the bed to the chair, how on earth are they going to walk to the toilet? Sometimes they can't even manage to get from the bed to the chair, let alone to go from a bed to a commode, which would be an alternative to walking to the toilet. And they may have to resort to a bedpan, which is, stay in bed. People can be very optimistic. They can be very optimistic in the things they want. And bless his cotton socks, I've just had a patient who came back. So I had him last week, and bless him, he's back. So he left the hospital and now he's back. And last week already he couldn't manage the commode, and needed to use a bedpan. And this time around, he again tried to convince me that he was absolutely fine going to the toilet. I said, and how's that going to happen? The mind is often willing and the body doesn't always cooperate. And it can be really difficult to face the facts of where you are at that moment in time. And whether that's you or whether that's a loved one, like a parent or a grandparent, who believe that they can, do everything themselves. And it's so obvious that that's not the case. And as long as they have capacity, you kind of have to listen to them. But it's such a difficult situation, because you know that when they go home, they can't manage on their own. And that makes it extra difficult for family and friends when they are visiting a loved one in hospital and the loved one says, but I want to go home, and the package of care is not in place. What to do? It's quite a task to look after someone who is not able to go to the toilet or wash themselves or cook and clean or whatever, everything that needs to be done to live a normal life. It's not only don't discharge yourself, but try to reason with a loved one who is in hospital and who would like to discharge themselves. Please try to make them see that it's bad move. Get package of care in place before you leave. It makes life so much easier once you're home. And it makes the relationship between family members easier as well. I've got this particular couple in mind, and the gentleman is progressively getting worse, and the wife is looking after him with no relief in the foreseeable future. So he will depend more and more and more on her, and she will take more the role of carer for her husband, which is amazing that she can do it. That's not necessarily a husband and wife relationship, which in itself is fine. But if you're eligible for a package of care, for someone to come and get the husband ready for the day in the morning, to wash and dress him, do everything that needs doing, to get him up and about, and in the evening to put him to bed, to get everything ready to put him to bed. That would already be such a relief for the wife, and it would restore a little bit of the husband and wife dynamic rather than carer and patient. So yeah, I don't know if there are other countries where this is the same, maybe in places where there isn't a centrally organized healthcare thing like the NHS, where you have to pay for it yourself and where the prices are astronomical. The hospital might want you to be in hospital longer. I don't know, because it's a for-profit thing. That's not the case in Great Britain. So I don't know if there are other countries where they've got a similar model to the UK. I think the Netherlands still has a similar model. But yeah, make sure your package of care is in place so that when you come home, you know that you can function from waking up to going back to bed. Your day is looked after, whether that is someone coming in to do groceries, or someone to put on your socks, or someone to give you a wash, or someone to cook a meal. There are ways and there are things that can be put in place. I hope this is clear. I hope you never have to use it. My daily work says that there are plenty of people who find themselves in this situation. What are the thoughts you overthink at 2 a.m.? What are the conversations you rehearse but never have? What are the feelings you minimize? Growth begins when you stop pretending that you are fine. Go to thequalityoflife.quest and book a one-to-one session. See you on the other side. I work at the emergency department, and there was this lady. She was medically fit. She had her discharge papers and she had her medication. So that's the whole package. And the only thing was she was waiting for her transport. And there was nothing to prevent her from sitting in the corridor. I know not everyone can sit, and not all transports are equal. Some people are bedbound and are waiting for transport in their bed, and they are then transferred to a trolley to be taken away by some sort of ambulance service to bring them wherever they need to be. That was not the case with this particular patient. She was physically capable of sitting in a chair, and it would do her no harm whatsoever if that were the case. That particular day, there was a puzzle. So we've got bays with 4 people, and 4 people per bay, and then we've got side rooms with 1 person in a side room. Those side rooms are used for patients who are either immunocompromised, so they are in the side room to protect them. And there are patients who've got some sort of contagious disease. So they are in the side room to protect the rest of the patients. Not all contagious diseases are created equally, and some are worse than others. And in this case, we had a patient who had a contagious disease already in one of the side rooms. Yet there was another patient who was in one of the bays who turned out to have a contagious disease that was even more contagious. It was even worse. So the one person needed to come out of the side room, and this patient with an even more contagious disease had to go into the side room. Now, if you think that's just a one-on-one swap, that's not how it works. First, the patient needs to come out of the side room. Then it needs to be professionally cleaned. We've got a special team, and that's what they do. They clean contagious places. I don't know what they're called. They're the specialist team. So for a while, you've got 2 contagious patients in the bay, and then the highly contagious person need to go in the side room, and then his place needs, or his or her, I can't even remember whether it was a he or she, doesn't matter, needs to be professionally cleaned, and so on. Anyway, you also try to put certain people together, preferably male and female separate in separate bays, and there are more parameters to keep in mind when you start moving patients about. In this case, it was a really, really difficult puzzle to get it right. But there was this patient who was going home, and she had everything you need in order to go home. Medically fit, she had the discharge papers already, and she had the medication. So there was nothing to stop her from leaving. So the nurse in charge politely asked her to wait in the corridor, and it was a no. It was a blank statement of no, I'm not leaving my bed. And we were all like, excuse me? And yeah, she was not leaving. And I said, well, I'm happy to go and, tell her to leave. No, I can't do that. And there was another healthcare assistant, and she goes, what's going on? I can make her go. But the nurse in charge, I don't know why, maybe she wasn't quite sure of the protocol or whether you can or can't do that. But yeah, both the other healthcare assistant and I were quite indignant. Why would you want to hold up a bed? You know, everyone knows that the NHS is under a lot of pressure. And with her staying in her bed, keeping that space occupied, it made things so much more difficult, and the people with the contagious diseases needed to do an extra step within the moving about, which, you know, it's not nice for the patient, first of all, to be moved about, but logistically it made it such a nightmare. And as I said, you know, the NHS, it's under a lot of pressure. If there's anything you can do that's within your power to make things easier and run smoother, you know, why would you stop that? It was so weird. It was so weird. So yeah, as I said, there's a first for everything. That was a first. I hope that I never have to deal with it again. I did ask the line manager, and she was flabbergasted. You know, how can someone do that? And we do have carte blanche to move people on. You know, just start moving their stuff to the corridor, which is where they can wait and they can still have, you know, their cup of tea, and they can still have a meal if that's the time of day. But they need to be moved on. And the rest of the patient needs to be as safe as possible, because, of course, that was another thing. As long as there's 2 infectious patients out there on a ward with very, very, very ill people, that's not good. You want to avoid that at all costs. So yeah, please, if you're listening to this and you live in the UK and you ever find yourself in that position, or you find family or friends in that position, please make sure that they move on to the next, you know, phase of their healing. And in this case, it would be the corridor. That's the end of this particular rant. Thank you for listening. And until we meet again. See you. Bye-bye.